Bitcoin's adoption is increasing all around the world. But why? Bitcoin is digital money and fits in the category of alternative currencies. They are supported by computer codes that get verified by a distributed network. Our society has no physical contact with them until there's a cash out. Now, there are problems like inflation, volatility, and trust in the current financial system. Bitcoin comes with relatively few regulatory hurdles for large-scale adoption, and it is determined to solve the problems in the current financial system by introducing these three main factors. Number 1, transparent governance. Number 2, decentralized networks. And number 3, monetary issuance, all of which are controlled by network consensus. The history of money is deeply ingrained in social relationships, which will have to be taken into account if we want Bitcoin to become a medium of exchange that is accepted by all parties. The relationship between Bitcoin and fiat currencies has changed considerably in the past 5 years, and that is largely due to how regulators have responded to cryptocurrency. The first halving took place in November 2012. At the time, Bitcoin was worth around $12.50, which is significantly below its value today, but still a major milestone at that time. A year later, in December 2013, Bitcoin peaked at just over $1,000 per coin. This was when Bitcoin and fiat currencies began to intersect more clearly. The original vision for Bitcoin was to create a peer-to-peer electronic cash system that would allow people to send money across the border without any need of an intermediary. That vision had little to do with fiat currency, but it soon became apparent that there was a demand for services that allowed people to purchase Bitcoin with fiat money. Bitcoin exchanges sprang up as a result, and within a few years, they made it possible for people from all over the world to buy Bitcoin easily and cheaply with credit cards and bank transfers. This helped make cryptocurrency part of the mainstream financial system. Regulators quickly started taking notice of this trend, but it did not take them long to decide that exchange operators needed licenses. Some countries took a very strict approach to licensing, but others took the opposite approach and either banned exchanges altogether or decided not to regulate them at all. Before looking at the problems, we first have to look at the benefits of the current financial system. Here are some of the benefits of the current financial system. The current financial system is based on trust. Banknotes, for example, were once backed by gold reserves, but now the only thing that gives them any value is the trust that we have in them. The banking system is a collection of institutions, both private and public, that allow us to deposit money, transfer funds, and exchange currencies. Banks use these deposits to create loans to people and businesses. The financial system can be thought of as a network of independent financial institutions, such as banks, that provide services such as lending money or converting one currency into another currency. The financial system allows people to do these three fundamental things. Number 1, save their money without the risk of losing it. Number 2, borrow money without having to know the people that they are borrowing from. Number 3, invest their money without having to understand all of the different types of investments available. The financial system is important because it helps determine economic growth. It gives money to the most productive sectors, which in turn leads to increased productivity and higher living standards. It also facilitates the process of saving and investment. The financial system is composed of these three basic aspects. Number 1, financial markets, where savers can transfer funds to borrowers. Number 2, financial intermediaries, which are institutions that channel funds from savers to borrowers. And number 3, the central bank or monetary authority, which regulates the financial system and manages the money supply. Now, what are the problems of the current financial system? The financial system has been fighting with some of those problems for centuries. It is a very controversial topic, but we're going to discuss the most basic and current problems of our financial system. The first problem is that money is not backed by anything tangible. In the past, paper currencies were backed by gold or silver, but this is not true anymore. Now, currency is only backed by the government that issues it. This means that fiat currency has no intrinsic value. This issue can be solved with the help of cryptocurrencies because they are limited in supply and cannot be manipulated by third parties such as central banks. It is also worth mentioning that there are many hidden fees in our current financial system, such as annual maintenance fees, ATM fees, and so on and so forth. Some services even charge a dormancy fee if you don't use your account often enough. Cryptocurrencies allow people to avoid these hidden fees because there are no middlemen anymore. The financial system has many problems, and one of them is the fact that it is inherently unstable. With all due respect to the efforts of governments and regulators and central banks, it is just not possible to avoid a crisis. The reason for this is simple. Once we allow people to create debt contracts that can be used as a currency, then we have created an inherently unstable system. A debt contract is essentially a promise to pay. In other words, if we want to have a stable financial system, and we really should, then we need to do something about the debt-based money system. Debt contracts are promises to pay in the future, so by their nature they are very risky. We would not want to use a currency which might lose value tomorrow, next week, next year, etc. because the debtor may default on their promise. In order to make these debt contracts acceptable as money, they have to be perceived as being safe. If we think that there's a risk of default, then we will only hold money if we think we can spend it before the default occurs. In other words, if debt-based money is going to work, then people must have confidence in it. Otherwise, it will cease being used as a means of exchange and become useless for that purpose. To create this confidence, such currency has to be managed by government or by other authorities which stand behind the currency. They provide guarantees about its stability. However, I think that Bitcoin can solve some of those problems of the financial system. Let's look at 3 fundamental problems that Bitcoin can eventually solve. Number 1, the problem of inflation. Bitcoin has a limited supply of 21 million Bitcoins and nearly 18 to 19 million coins that are already in circulation. This means that there's no more room for Bitcoin inflation because there's a limited supply. Number 2, the problem of trust. The blockchain technology allows to solve the problem of trust between participants of economic relations. Since it does not require trusting a single point or person, the blockchain stores all transactions and data, which is why it's impossible to change them or make new ones with false signatures. Number 3, the problem of security in the financial sector. Another serious problem for banking institutions is the low level of information security, which leads to leaks, frauds with customer data, hacking, theft of funds, and number 4, the problem of fiat currencies. To understand this, we need to take a closer look at what fiat currencies are. Fiat currency is a currency that a government has declared to be legal tender, but it is not backed by a physical commodity. The value of fiat money is derived from the relationship between supply and demand, rather than the value of the material that the money is made from. Fiat is the Latin word for "it shall be," and it was first used in the early 1500s by a famous Venetian painter known as Titian. Fiat money gives central banks greater control over the economy because they can control how much money is printed. Most modern paper currencies are fiat currencies, including the US dollar, the euro, and other major global currencies. In general, governments print additional fiat currencies whenever there is economic growth or when inflation needs to be combated with an increase in consumer spending power. However, most modern economies rely on a credit-based consumer spending to sustain themselves, which means fiat currencies can be created out of thin air by central banks to stimulate consumer spending. This can lead to hyperinflation if too much fiat money enters the circulation. One of the most obvious advantages of using Bitcoin as opposed to fiat currency is that unlike traditional currencies such as the US dollar or the Japanese yen, Bitcoins are not subject to central bank manipulation. That is a fundamental difference. Given the amount of money that is poured into quantitative easing programs by central banks across the globe, it is difficult to gain faith in fiat currencies at present time. From a personal standpoint, I believe that fiat currencies are on the verge of collapse. While this may be an extreme viewpoint, it would be naive to think that this is not a possibility. Much of what transpires with Bitcoin will likely depend on its potential use as a medium of exchange over the long term. As mentioned above, there are currently thousands of merchants who accept Bitcoin on the list, and it continues to grow on a daily basis. This includes major companies such as Dell. To illustrate how things can change quickly in this space, Tesla announced that they will no longer accept Bitcoin as a form of payment for their products due to their concern with increasing use of fossil fuels. When it comes to Bitcoin mining purposes, in order for Bitcoin to evolve into a widely accepted medium of exchange, these types of issues will have to be addressed and overcome by those involved in the Bitcoin mining operations. The value of Bitcoin is tied directly to the laws of supply and demand. In other words, the price is determined only by what the market is willing to pay. If more people want to buy Bitcoins, then the price will increase. If more people want to sell it, then the price will decrease. Bitcoin's value can be volatile when compared to traditional currencies such as the US dollar because it is unregulated and not tied to any government. Bitcoin's price is measured against fiat currencies such as American dollars, Chinese yuan, euro, etc. Bitcoin therefore appears superficially similar to any symbol traded on foreign currency exchange markets. Unlike fiat currency, however, there's no official Bitcoin price, only various averages based on price feeds from global exchanges. So these are some of the other things to take into consideration. Now, we have discussed the benefits of the financial system, we have looked at the problems of the financial system, and we have looked at how Bitcoin could potentially solve some of those problems. I'm really curious to hear what you think about this. Let me know in the comments, and I will respond to every single comment down below. Like this video if you enjoyed this content.